This happened to my girlfriend and I on a road trip about 6 years ago. Every year, we drive up to my grandparents' house in northern Iowa to go and visit them as a sort of annual family get-together. We lived in Iowa City while my grandparents lived in Boone, which is a very small town north of the state which is located in a very rural part of Iowa. Grasslands, rolling hills, cattle, you get the picture. Anyway, we had packed everything up and started to drive the 2-hour-long trip to Boone. About halfway through the drive, we start to head into the country with open fields when I notice a car parked on the side of the road right next to a cornfield. It has its headlights still on, and all 4 doors were open, so I knew whoever's car this was couldn't have gone far. My girlfriend and I get out of our F-150 and search it for anyone. But expectedly, there was nothing except for some keys and a notebook. My girlfriend starts calling out for anyone, but there was no response. The road we were on went on for miles across the state, and there were no other cars or buildings in sight. I told my girlfriend to go search the field while I kept looking around the car for anything like a phone to find out who was here. After about 5 minutes of looking around, I didn't find anything, so I closed the car door when I hear the blood-curdling scream of my girlfriend. She then comes running out of the cornfield crying and tells me that we need to get back in the truck. As soon as we do, I kid you not, I see 4 men with masks appear out of the field. I hit the gas pedal so hard that you could swear my legs were spring-loaded. All the while, my girlfriend was breathing heavily while I tried to calm her down as to what she had seen. It took her a few minutes to relax, but she then finally had the courage to speak to me. She explained to me that she had gone into the field when she came to a small little clearing where she saw the dead body of a woman laying down. Based on her description, she told me that the woman looked dead for, at most, an hour or 2. We contacted the local sheriff about it, but I don't know what became of it. Till this day, I'm convinced that what we encountered that night was some sort of ambush to lure unsuspecting victims into their sick trap. God only knows what would have happened had those men caught us.
When I was 24 years old, I experienced something so strange, so scary, that I just had to write about it and share it with the world. It is absolutely true and was the scariest thing that has ever happened in my life. I was traveling at the time, going to visit my best friend who had moved a few states away from me to go to college. One day, I was driving in Ohio, if I remember correctly. I was on a long highway that stretched across the state when out of nowhere, my car died. I shifted to the side of the road where I eventually came to a stop. I didn't run out of gas. I had just filled up at the last town. I tried starting my car, and I was very happy when it actually started. I was confused and was worried about why the hell it just died on me. As I started to pick up speed and get back on track, my car started making weird noises, and it sounded like something was grinding on something else. I looked up and saw a sign that showed that there was a gas station and food at the next exit. My car was moving, but with this grinding noise, I decided to get off the highway and take a look at it at the gas station. There were only 2 places off this exit that I could see. A gas station with 1 pump, and an old-looking diner not too far off next to it. I pulled into the gas station, and it looked closed. I checked my watch and quickly realized this was strange as hell. It was only 2:30 p.m. What kind of gas station closes before this time? I got out of my car and approached the glass door entrance to the station. I put my hands up and cupped the glass around my eyes to see inside. The place looked abandoned. It was obvious nobody was there, and I turned and looked around me. I felt a bit uneasy at this moment when I saw that no other people or cars were around me. What the hell? Where am I? I checked my phone and of course, I had no service. I looked up at the sky and it was white. The clouds were moving fiercely and it was cold as hell outside. I decided to get back in my car and drive it over to the diner. When I reached this place, I thought for sure it was closed as well. But to my surprise, before I could even reach the door after getting out of my car, an old woman opened the door to the place and greeted me with a smile. She looked nice, and I was so relieved to see somebody else and maybe get some hot food in my stomach. She said hello and asked if it was just me, did I want a booth, blah blah blah. I told her yes, it was only me, and a booth sounded fine. This diner looked very old-fashioned, and there was no other customers inside. The woman showed me to my seat, and I scooted into the booth. I looked up at her, and she was wearing an old apron with stains all over it. Her teeth were old, cracked, and yellow. She had a pleasant voice, though, and she seemed to be a very nice person. She handed me a menu and asked what I'd like to drink. I told her a Coke or Pepsi would be great, and she smiled and said she'd be right back. I sat there looking at this menu, and there was dirt on it. It looked like it had been sitting outside for years. I cleaned it off, and the food that was on it that was available was very basic. Burger, chicken sandwich, fries, salad. That was pretty much it. I decided to order the burger with some fries. A few minutes passed, and she hadn't returned with my drink yet. I was anxious to ask her if there was a mechanic around that could look at my car. A few more minutes passed, and I started thinking, what the hell is going on back there? I yelled out, "Hello?" in as nice a voice as possible. I got no response. At this point, I was annoyed, and I got up. I walked over to the door that led into the back cooking area and swung it open, about to ask where my drink was. To my surprise, the back of the diner was empty. There was no cooks, no fryers, no grills, nothing. The woman was nowhere in sight. It was obvious that this diner was not a running establishment, and I felt sick to my stomach. I started to walk into the back area when I heard the scariest, most evil old lady laugh I've ever heard. I stopped and backed up out the door into the front. I turned and walked out the door I came in from. I ran down the 3 steps and over to my car and got inside. Thank God my car started and I floored it out of there. As I was driving away, I looked into my rearview mirror and saw the woman standing in the middle of the road.
A little bit of context as to what made this story absolutely terrifying. I've been a trucker for about 5 years now, and at the time I lived in New Hampshire with my wife. I lived in a very rural part of the state, and my only source of income was from this job. What we'd basically do is transport certain goods over land and distribute them to companies. It was, to say the least, a relaxed kind of job. Most days, I would drive from town to town during the late night shifts, so oftentimes I'd have my coffee with me to keep me awake. This one night, though, I didn't have my coffee. It was around 1 a.m., and I was doing my usual nightly routine of delivering some materials for a warehouse company by doing shipments. If I remember correctly, I was driving down a narrow road with a lot of trees on both sides, which I'm not gonna lie, made me feel a bit uneasy. The thing about this road, however, was the obvious fact that it didn't have the 2 yellow lines that separate the lanes. Needless to say, I kept driving down the road when I thought I could see something in the middle of the road about 30 or so feet away. It only took me a few seconds to realize that it was a pickup truck. Its lights were still on, and laying beside it were 2 bodies, a man and a woman. However, something seemed off about the whole thing. The bodies were parallel to each other, as if it had been staged. I grabbed my .22 and got out of my truck to inspect the scene. Upon closer inspection, I could see an open suitcase with personal belongings scattered all over the pavement. As weird as the whole situation was, I had this unsettling feeling, like a sense of dread. Something told me that this wasn't some crime scene, and that I should get back in the truck immediately. I trusted my instincts and got back in, when I heard a loud scream from somewhere in the woods. My blood ran cold as I heard this, and that's when I see people emerging out of the woods in multiple directions. I floored it down the road, not looking back, with my heart pounding 100 times per second. When I looked in my rearview mirror, I saw that the 2 bodies that were lying on the ground were now up on their feet.
When I was younger, every year for Christmas I would drive upstate to my aunt's house along a stretch of highway. I cannot for the life of me remember the name of this road. All I know is it runs nearby Akron in New York at some point. However, most of the drive is through rural areas with little to no towns nearby. So it was the dead of night, and my groggy self had gotten off a long shift and had to drag my ass to my aunt's house since my extended family was expecting me the following morning. Near halfway through the drive, I realized I was low on gas, which irritated me. My brother told me that he had filled it up the day before, so he either forgot or was straight lying. I saw an archaic-looking sign for a gas station off the next road. It wasn't an official road sign, literally a pole with a slab of metal attached with "gas off next exit" or something along those lines, painted on. That seemed a little sketchy, but people do the same thing with fruit stands on highways, so whatever. I pulled off the next exit on some dilapidated country-ass road through dense woods. The whole thing was creepy and surreal. I kept expecting Leatherface to come running out of the trees with a chainsaw. Anyways, eventually I came to the gas station and realized quickly it hadn't been open for years. It was all rusted, and the convenience store's roof was caving in. The gas pumps had all been taken out as well. I pulled over next to it and checked my gauge. I would probably only make it another half mile before running out, so I called AAA, and they said they would send a truck over. Now I played the waiting game. I left my engine on because when the headlights were off, everything was pitch black, and my paranoid self wasn't sitting next to an abandoned gas station in the middle of a forest in complete darkness. So most of the wait went uneventful until I sensed movement around the side of the old store, where my lights are pointed. I look up, but didn't see anything more, so I look back down at my phone. Then, over the sounds of the night, I hear someone yell, "Hey buddy, come here," in a demanding tone. I look up and I shit you not, there's a dude standing by the old store, looking towards me, illuminated by my headlights. He looked like a run-of-the-mill homeless guy. I was honestly spooked and figured he must have been squatting there. Still watching him, I rolled down my window and yelled something like,
Yeah, what's up?" Still mentally crapping myself. I had my foot ready to floor it out of there at the first sign of trouble. "You got any change?" "Nah, I don't, sorry man." I look up at him. He has this kind of vacant expression and is standing stiff. Then I see more movement. There are heads, about 20 or so heads, peeking around the trees beyond the man I'm talking to. I can't see them clearly at all, but they are definitely people, literally just heads, staring in my directions from around the trees. I see another guy beginning to walk from around the gas station, and then I turned around and sped off. I got as far away from that place as my tank could carry me, and updated AAA on my location. The driver came back over and filled me up, and I didn't say anything. But after he left, I wanted to call the cops, so I called the nearest town's sheriff department. They said they would send a trooper over, and I gave them the location. When I got to my aunt's house, they called me back and said whoever was there was gone, but they could tell a large number of people had been living there for a while. Blankets, canned food, the usual. The whole situation still freaks me out, but frankly, I can consider myself lucky. I'll always have such a creepy story to tell. I'm just glad nothing bad happened. Yeah, and to the creepy dudes at that gas station, let's not meet.
When I was about 24, I worked the early morning shift as a cashier at my local McDonald's in Florida during the winter. Life was kind of what you'd expect for Florida. It's hot and humid, and you'd occasionally get your brief cold fronts. I had moved down to Miami for college and attended a school just outside of the city. But seeing as I didn't have enough money for college, I had to take out a student loan and pay it off by getting a job at McDonald's, which was, and is, the worst job a person could have. Anyway, as previously mentioned, I had worked the morning shift from 4 a.m. to 9 a.m. as a cashier. I know it's not the best position in the world, but as long as the money was involved, any job was good enough. It was just me and my 2 coworkers, and I only considered one of them as a friend. One morning, I had arrived to the McDonald's before my other coworker, who had the keys, so I was forced to wait outside in the cold until she arrived. So I'm leaning against my car, scrolling through Twitter and whatnot, when I see a man in a black raincoat approach the front doors. He cups his hand on the glass, looking inside, and I tell him that we were closed and that he'd have to come back later. He turns to face me and says, "Could you please just open the door and let me inside? I just want a coffee." I tell him that we were closed once again and that we wouldn't be open for another 2 hours, but told him that I would be glad to serve him later. He starts giving me this look I can't even describe. I guess it was a look of disappointment to some extent, but he then started walking away, disappearing into the night. It seemed as if he took the hint and decided not to cause any trouble. Finally, my coworker pulls in and she opens the door for us when I see the guy in the raincoat approach us again. We get inside and lock the door. When he got to the door, he starts pounding on the glass with his fists, demanding that we get his coffee. It was at that point when I realized that he was holding something behind his back, which he clearly didn't want us to see. My fear was that it was a gun, but whatever it was surely meant he was up to no good. Suddenly, I hear the glass shatter and I see him stepping into the store with a miniature axe. My heart sank into the pit of my stomach, and I told my coworker that we had to leave through the back door. She complied and we both left as this man tried to run after us. Thankfully, there was a police officer on duty on the other side of the street that saw the whole thing unfold. The officer followed us into the McDonald's with his gun drawn, but like in most situations like this, the man was gone. The glass doors had been shattered and the registers had been opened. I'm not sure if he was ever caught, but I like to think he was. It's been 4 years now, and I no longer work at McDonald's. This happened about a year ago in my first semester of college. I went to art school in New York City, and my friends and I had a craving for fast food at around 12:30 a.m. We decided on the McDonald's down the street because we're classy as hell. It was me, my friend Kat, and her boyfriend Tom. We order our food, and Kat and I decide to split a shit ton of chicken nuggets and pick a table by the door. Tom and Kat are sitting next to each other, holding hands as couples do, and I'm sitting there being the awkward third wheel and gorging myself on nuggets. In walks a slightly disheveled gentleman who starts to wander aimlessly in the direction of the register. We think nothing of him at first. I watch as he goes over to order his food and turns back to my friends to chat. Suddenly, Kat mutters, "Anna, behind you." So I turn around and there's this slightly disheveled gentleman again. This time, he's holding a flashlight. I turn back around to Kat and shrug, figuring it's just some harmless weirdo. I then feel a tap on my shoulder, so I turn around again and the guy asks, "The light isn't working in the men's room. Can one of you hold this flashlight while I use the toilet?" Kat, being the nice and most outgoing person of the group, responds first. "Oh, well, maybe you should tell an employee that the lights don't work. I bet they could figure it out for you." "I'll only be a minute," the guy mutters and holds his flashlight out to us. "Could one of you just hold this while I pee?" he insisted. Tom answered next as I was determined to ignore the man. "No, just go ask an employee to fix the lights for you." "But I'll only be..." The man began again, but I interrupted him with a firm, "Go away!" It was a weird situation, but as we were leaving, Kat said, "You know, he never went into the bathroom in the first place. How would he know the lights didn't work?" When I was 16, my family and I lived in an apartment complex in a rural area outside of Chicago. Chicago was a really busy city, and neither of us liked crowded places, which is why we chose to live in a more secluded area. I had only one friend at the time named Tyler, who was just a little older than me, but still fun to hang out with. He lived a few doors down from me, and oftentimes we'd go over to each other's places and play video games and whatnot. One night, Tyler, his girlfriend Maria, and I had just seen the new Avengers movie, one of the best films in 2019 in my opinion. Since the movie ended late, most places were closed by now, and we were more hungry than ever. With no other option, we decided to hit up our local McDonald's to go grab a bite. It's not the best food to have, but we were still high school teens and we didn't have a lot of money. So we go in, order our food, and find a table immediately. Like I said, it was well into the night, so finding a table was easy. Tyler and Maria sat next to each other like all couples do and shared their food while I sat in front of them. While we were talking about school and stuff, I glanced behind Tyler and his girlfriend and noticed a man sitting down with nothing on his table. He's scrolling through his phone and looks up at me, and we make eye contact for a brief second before he starts to talk with Tyler and Maria. I then see him get up and start heading towards us, and I thought, great, probably another guy wanting money for drugs. He approaches our table and starts asking us if we could help him unload a few things from his car. Seeing as we were about done with our meals, we agreed to help him as we were a nice group of teens and Tyler and I were both pretty strong. We leave the McDonald's and head out into the parking lot, approaching his van, when suddenly Tyler looks at his phone and apologizes, telling us that we had to go. The man looks at us, confused, insisting that we help him out, but Tyler ignores him and walks off with us until we were far away from the restaurant. I asked Tyler what had happened. He looked petrified and told me that when he was approaching the van, he could very faintly see two men wearing masks looking through the window. So, I've been working at what is considered to be the world's largest McDonald's chain in Orlando, Florida. To give you an idea as to how big the establishment is, we have a large play place, a whole dining area the size of a cafeteria, and a large kitchen. It sounds like your typical McDonald's, but it's a lot bigger than you think. Anyway, I had been working the late night shift from around 6 to 12 p.m. as I was still in college and had classes during the day. So the night shift was the only time I had been available to work. One night at around 11:30 p.m., I was finishing up my shift and we were getting ready to close, which meant that we weren't allowing any more customers. I had to use the restroom one last time before I ended my shift, and when I went into the women's restroom, I noticed that the lights were extremely dim. After all, the lights hadn't been replaced in forever, so I did my business when it started to become ridiculously cold. It was the middle of summer and the temperature was 70 last time I checked. Then, what happened next is something that will never leave me. A loud bang came from the stall over, and I instantly went pale. As I'm unlocking the stall door, I hear a faint giggle from the stall over. I didn't even dream of looking into that stall. I ran out of that restroom so fast, only to end up freaking out about it to my manager. My manager went into the restroom and opened up all the stalls, but she didn't find anyone. I'm still convinced that till this day, that I was not alone in that restroom. I remember this just briefly, as this happened a long time ago, but I'll try my best to explain my story in full detail. I was 19 years old, and I just started my first year working at McDonald's as a cashier. I got paid minimum wage, so it wasn't the best job in the world, but any money was good enough for me. Anyway, I work at one of those McDonald's that have those outdoor play places, so you would have a lot of kids coming in and out. I know most restaurant chains don't have them anymore, but this was many years ago when they were still around. So one day, I'm working the counter and I just served the last customer as it was getting late into the day and the store was slow. I'm helping my coworker place napkins in the holders and help refill sauces when I notice a kid talking to a man. The guy was an inappropriately dressed Latino man with shorts and a white tank top, which seemed a bit off, but people like that came in all the time. At first, I assumed it was his father or something, but that immediately checked out when I heard, "Oh, my nephew likes video games too. Let's go play with him." My blood ran cold as he said this, and as much as I wanted to confront him, I couldn't. I'm a 5-foot girl, and this guy looked to be well over 6 feet tall, so I couldn't take him on even if I tried. The man started grabbing the little boy's arm, clearly tight, while heading toward the exit. Thankfully, one of the very few customers still at the McDonald's noticed this and yelled, "Hey, what the hell are you doing with her son?" Instantly, the man went pale and his eyes were as big as saucers. He immediately lets go and apologizes, telling him that he was just, quote, helping him find his mom, which of course is BS by now. The customer took the boy away from the man, and his mom then came out of the woman's restroom, but at that point, the man was gone. She then took her kid and left, and I've never seen that man since. For God's sake, don't leave your child unattended like that. Anyway, that's my story, and I hope you can learn from it.